The day I realized my silence had real weight was the day no one knew my name in a company that couldn't breathe without me. I wasn't on the org chart, no Slack profile, no team photo from last year's mandatory fun escape room event. But the code, the logic, the bone marrow of the entire damn system Kavara was betting its future on, that was all me. Quietly, invisibly, uncredited. Just a contractor, at least on paper. They kept me under a shell vendor agreement, filed 2 subsidiaries deep, like some kind of compliance nesting doll. Why? Because the CFO, Marcus, understood 2 things. 1, politics kill progress, and 2, I don't do politics. I do clean architecture, auditable logic, elegant systems that scream when tampered with. I'd been at Kavara for 27 months, officially billed as back-end compliance consultant, unofficially the architect of their flagship financial operations engine. See, Kavara wasn't just writing enterprise software, they were selling a dream to banks. Let us automate your operational audits, the pitch went. Let our software trigger lending conditions based on live performance data. Which sounds slick, until you realize how easy that is to abuse, unless someone like me builds in the skeleton. And that's what I did. A system so tightly wired into its own integrity that any unauthorized tampering sent up flares. A digital conscience, you might say, but you wouldn't know that from walking past my desk, because I didn't have a desk. I logged in from my kitchen table, same table where my cat once puked on an Ethernet cable during a sprint review. My name was never called in town halls. HR never remembered to CC me on policy updates. And I liked it that way. No birthday cards, no gendered women in tech LinkedIn posts with my face plastered under a Canva graphic. Just clean code, cryptic commit messages, and a direct line to Marcus when the architecture needed finesse. And you know what? I was fine with that. I didn't want the spotlight. Let the VPs elbow each other for headcount and LinkedIn glory posts. I'd rather sip coffee from a chipped mug and build something no one else understood until it broke. Hey, by the way, if you're deep into this story already and haven't subscribed or hit the like button, don't be that guy. Seriously, 90% of y'all just lurk. Show the team some love, it's what keeps this engine humming, unlike Kavara's apparently. Anyway, Marcus was the only one who got it. He gave me space, autonomy, and most importantly, authority. We had a good rhythm. Every other week, we'd hop on a quiet call. He'd say things like keep them honest or bake in the boundaries. I'd deliver. He never micromanaged, never asked for slide decks or Jira dashboards. Just results, and I gave them. Our system passed 2 external audits in 2023 alone, which kept our revolving door of executives blissfully unaware of how many times I'd patched around their mistakes. He told me once, "You're the parachute they don't know they're wearing." Then he got sick. No warning. Just a note from his assistant saying he'd be on medical leave for a few weeks. That was it. No voice call. No prep meeting. One minute I was reporting to the only person who understood the structure. The next I was dangling in the wind with a system only I knew how to interpret and no clear backup plan. Enter Eric, Vice President of Strategic Ops, which as far as I could tell meant he sat in meetings and added nothing of value while quietly calculating who he could step on to reach the next rung. You know the type? Starched shirts, laminated buzzwords, and a LinkedIn banner of him at Davos, even though he only went to Switzerland once for a ski trip with his ex's uncle. Eric had a master's in organizational optimization, which is code for firing people and making spreadsheets about it. Minute Marcus was gone, Eric bloomed like mold in a flooded basement. Started showing up in meetings he'd never cared about, asking who owns this line item, and why are we still contracting this out? He didn't even know my name the first week, just referred to me as the compliance module resource. He started realigning teams, called it a visibility phase, which translated to, everyone had to submit weekly reports, roadmaps, and status updates, except me. Of course, because I wasn't on his books. I was still technically buried in a vendor agreement written in legalese and held in a shared drive he didn't even know existed. But I knew this game. I've lived through 6 reorgs in my career. You don't flinch. You don't speak, you watch, and you document everything. So I kept building, kept logging in, kept tweaking the logic trees that governed whether the system would throw alerts to our bank partner. I'd built in a credential flag, just a quiet signature embedded in the core modules like a watermark. If that signature got tampered with, boom, instant reauthentication request from the bank. Not malicious, not dramatic, just protocol. But it meant the system would stop the moment someone tried to erase me without the proper procedure. Which, let's be real, no one ever reads. So I waited. I documented, I archived, and I kept an encrypted copy of everything, because I knew damn well the storm was coming. I just didn't know it would arrive in a smug little envelope delivered over coffee, with a side of corporate delusion. Marcus's absence dropped like a piano onto a quiet sidewalk. One week we were talking about versioning schema over Slack at midnight, the next he was gone, out for urgent treatment, no further detail, indefinite leave. Just like that, the only person in the entire damn org who knew what I did, and more importantly, why I did it was off the chessboard. I didn't panic, not at first. Marcus was the kind of guy who left breadcrumbs, buried keys, a trail of logic even in his absences. We had a process. We had encryption protocols. There was a backup credential stack in a vault only he and I had access to. I figured, worst case scenario, he'd brief whoever stepped in. But Eric didn't want a briefing. Eric wanted control. Within 72 hours of Marcus's exit, Eric declared himself acting operational lead and started moving furniture, figuratively and literally. Entire teams got renamed. Directors were streamlined. Slack channels disappeared. He even had the nerve to send an all-staff memo with the subject line, "New era, new energy." I swear, I could feel Marcus's ulcer growing from wherever he was recovering. Eric had always been one of those second-tier guys, hovering just outside decision-making rooms, sniffing for weakness. The kind who says, "Let's align," before stabbing you in the quarterly review. And now that he had a sliver of power, he wanted to squeeze it until it screamed. First came the visibility push. Everyone had to submit weekly reports, personal impact logs, and 15-slide updates on their value-add vectors. I watched a senior engineer cry in a hallway Zoom window over having to color-code their roadmap. They'd worked here 12 years, built the payment gateway that processed 80% of our client transactions, but none of that mattered to Eric if it wasn't on a PowerPoint. And me, I was a ghost, a non-line item. My contract wasn't in HR's main system. I wasn't on his org chart. There was no Julie in the directory he had access to, because Marcus had tucked me deep into the guts of a compliance budget no one ever questioned. At first, I thought that protected me. Then came the Friday ping. One line, no greeting, no signature. Your access will be reviewed soon. Please be prepared to justify your continued involvement. That was it. No context, no hi. Just a veiled threat typed by some lackey with a superiority complex and a template. I stared at it for a full minute, took a sip of cold coffee, then laughed just once short mean. I knew what that meant. I'd seen it before. Review meant removal. Justify meant beg, and I don't beg. I've been quietly replaced enough times in my life to spot the smoke before the fire. The review would come with a meeting I wasn't prepared for, followed by a decision already made. Still, I didn't react. I nodded to the empty room, closed the tab, and opened my version control logs instead. You know what they never think about? Continuity. They think deleting someone's credentials makes them vanish. They think ownership of IP is something you yell into a conference call and it becomes law. They don't understand systems, dependencies, intent. Eric had no idea that the very system he was about to poke had teeth. I had built it to audit itself. Every key decision, every logic gate, every internal rule had attribution embedded. It wasn't just code. It was a living map of who told it to do what. And you can't retroactively strip that without causing a mess. A very visible, very traceable mess. But Eric was running around like a kid with scissors, convinced he was cutting ribbons instead of arteries. He made his rounds on Monday, started asking around about cost centers. By Tuesday, he was holding discretionary expense reviews. Wednesday, one of my senior devs pinged me with a just got reassigned. Eric's pushing for contractor consolidation. Translation, you're next. Thursday night, I got a second email. This one had his name on it. Need to clarify the scope of your involvement. Please join me for a brief sync tomorrow morning at 8:30. Bring documentation of deliverables. Bring documentation. The man really said that, like I was some intern begging for college credit. I didn't reply. I didn't prep a pitch. I didn't dig through Gantt charts or pull KPI stats. I didn't need to. I was the deliverable. My work lived in the veins of that platform. It was one of those rare truths in a corporate world full of fluff. Without me, it wouldn't work. They just hadn't realized it yet. And I had a feeling Eric was about to learn the hard way what happens when you fire the ghost holding the keys. Friday morning, 8:27 a.m. The invite said 8:30, but I wasn't about to give Eric the satisfaction of calling me late. I stood outside his office door, if you could call it that, one of those glass-box fishbowls they give middle managers to feel important. He was already inside, typing with 2 fingers like a toddler playing whack-a-mole on a keyboard. The second he saw me through the glass, he smiled. Not friendly, triumphant. He gestured without standing. Julie, come in. No handshake. No chair offered. Just a man in a fitted shirt too tight across the shoulders, trying to play kingmaker in a sandbox. I'll keep this brief, he began, folding his hands over a manila folder like it was a presidential briefing. We've done a full review of your contract, or lack thereof, really. It seems your role here isn't formally defined. No W-2, no HR file, no system owner assignment. Just a lot of vague references and back-end commits from a vendor ID. That's not sustainable. I didn't move, didn't blink. Just let him talk. Theatrical silence unnerves guys like this. He took a breath, like he was winding up for the big finale. You've contributed to some valuable architecture. I won't deny that, he said, in the same tone you'd use to compliment a barista's latte art. But value needs ownership. And right now, there's too much ambiguity around yours. So, effective immediately, your contract is terminated. Please remove all company-related files from your local environment. Delete any proprietary code or documentation. You'll receive a final payout via your vendor. And of course, he paused here, smirking like he was delivering a punchline only he thought was clever. All your work belongs to the company now. I smiled, just slightly, like someone who's already packed their bags before the breakup. Any questions? He added, smug. Just one, I said. Do you mind putting that in writing? He blinked, but only for a second. Then he reached for the folder and slid a single-page memo across the table. It was already printed, already signed. To whom it may concern, effective immediately, the services of vendor, Larkspur Systems and associated personnel, duly redacted, are no longer required. All proprietary work conducted under this agreement is considered the intellectual property of Kavara Holdings, Inc. All local data and systems must be permanently deleted. Eric Donovan, VP Strategic Ops. I read it once, folded it neatly, slipped it into my bag. Understood, I said. I didn't defend myself, didn't argue, didn't explain that the language in his memo directly violated 3 clauses of the original vendor agreement Marcus had filed under the CFO's compliance umbrella, because explaining would imply I needed his permission to exist. Instead, I stood, nodded once, and walked out. No dramatic door slam, no parting shot, just the click of my heels on laminate tile and the whir of the badge reader as I handed in my access card to a receptionist who looked like she wanted to disappear into the ficus plant beside her. By 9:10 a.m., I was back at my apartment. I made coffee, sat in silence, watched the steam curl above the mug like breath in winter. My laptop was open, and the terminal waited. Lank expectant, I opened my local repository. Thousands of lines of code. Branches, diffs, documentation trails, all of it mine, all of it tied to my digital signature. And now, per Eric's order, all of it slated for deletion, so I did exactly what he asked. I deleted everything. I didn't archive it, didn't hide it in some encrypted folder or squirrel it away in a private repo. I deleted the local environment, the dev tools, the mirror backups, the test harnesses, even the architecture diagrams stored in my OneNote. Gone, all of it like it had never existed. But see, Eric made a fatal assumption. He thought my laptop was the system. What he didn't understand, what Marcus did, was that my real value wasn't in the code I stored. It was in what I built into the code. Triggers, checks, identity flags, compliance logic that screamed when it was tampered with. He hadn't just fired a contractor. He'd yanked a thread out of a live circuit, thinking it was decorative. And now that thread was sparking. Before I shut the lid, I did one more thing. I opened a secure cloud drive I hadn't touched in over a year. Encrypted, 2-factor authenticated, accessed only through a fingerprint-secured terminal app Marcus had once jokingly called my black box. Inside was a folder named just in case. I opened it. There it was, the memo. Scanned, time-stamped. Signed by Eric Donovan, directly instructing me to delete active company IP. I duplicated it, not because I needed to use it right away, but because something in me had shifted, something cold, metallic, precise. It wasn't fear. Fear was soft. This was different. This was war protocol. And Eric, he just fired the one person holding the detonation codes. Eric didn't waste a second savoring his tiny power trip. By noon, I was already getting word through back channels, Slack messages from engineers who knew better than to openly acknowledge me. The tone was always the same, forced casual, vaguely apologetic. Hey, just heard you're off the project? That sucks. Eric's calling it a streamlining. He said you were legacy overhead, unclear if he knows what half your code does. FYI, he told the data team you left voluntarily. Said something about rotating in fresh perspective. Also, what the hell is happening with the metrics dashboard? I didn't reply, just read and archived. Eric apparently had done a little victory lap that morning, popped into the product lead's huddle and bragged about cleaning out inefficiencies. Said I was a black box dev who'd been over-architecting things. One of the junior PMs swore he heard Eric say I kept legacy code alive just to justify my existence. Cute. Let him talk. Let him posture. Meanwhile, somewhere far above Eric's pay grade, a different kind of alert had already fired off. At 1:46 p.m., a compliance flag hit Kavara's secured banking dashboard when I had wired directly into the heartbeat of the ops system. A deletion event tied to a credential that hadn't gone through formal offboarding. My credential, my signature, purged under verbal instruction with no audit trail, no handoff log, no revocation record. You don't just delete that and walk away. Not when that signature is hard-coded into the system's operational trust logic. Not when your bank partner uses that very signature to determine whether your org is operating within the thresholds defined in your loan agreement. Kavara's line of credit wasn't some rubber-stamped overdraft. It was conditional. Contingent on provable, monitored operational integrity. And I was part of that proof. My credential was baked into the compliance scaffolding like rebar in concrete. Pull it out wrong and the whole thing wobbles. By 2:03 p.m., a freeze order was issued. Kavara's $18.5 million revolving line of credit was locked pending internal review. Not canceled, not revoked, just suspended, like a parent pausing an allowance when they hear a crash from the next room. Quiet, subtle, devastating, and Eric, he didn't notice. At least not yet. He was too busy posting in the #Ops leadership channel about reducing contractor reliance and suggesting we in-house compliance accountability. He even linked a Medium article about agile transparency, which, fun fact, was written by a man who got fired from his own startup for stealing competitor code. I logged out of Slack. Then I poured myself a glass of wine. It wasn't joy. It wasn't smugness. It was something quieter. Like watching a Rube Goldberg machine you built with spare parts finally tip its first domino. I knew how this would play out. The system would flag the deletion. The bank's bot would ping the compliance portal. Our liaison, Janelle,